All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Simo?
It's Friday, so it is Wheel of Time, and we are on Towers of Midnight, the big giant long book with short chapters.
Yeah, we've got four chapters we're going to get through today. I think it should be pretty quick. There are a couple points where we might end up going down some tangents, but
Yeah, I don't know if I was in a mood last night or when I was rereading this, or if this is actually these are legitimate topics, but I do have a few notes that are.
I don't know how nitpicky we'll get. So just from the outset, I will say these are some of my favorite Sanderson chapters out of all three books.
Yeah, and I've got
Especially
notes.
the first two, 12 and 13.
I've got notes where I'm like, yeah, Sanderson nails it here, but then there's a secondary thought of unless Jordan didn't mean her to be that way kind of thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
I did get a slightly different vibe in earlier books on the same character. But the way that the story is going in the Sanderson realm, that was like, okay, that worked right there.
Yeah, especially for me, what really stands out in chapter 12 and 13 is hero Rand, fully realized, you know, self-actualized. Maslov would be proud of you, boy. You done good. You know, he writes him very well, and it is a very triumphant moment, a long time coming because of all the crap that Rand has been through for so long. That it is a very cathartic release to see him. You done good, son.
Yeah, and it's to relate this to what I do and stuff, just to give everybody something they're not going to get on Wheel of Time from anything else. Rand Rand's default mode network was cranked up to 11, and now it's settled down, and his ventral media prefrontal cortex is back where it needs to be, and he can actually take in the environment and react to it properly instead
Yeah.
of what is actually a very classic symptom of not only depression but psychopathy, which is rumination. And what was one of the major things with Rand when he was being hard as steel? His list of names. The list of names was the theme. That
Hmm.
was that was the thing that really kept driving him crazy and making him do all the things. That was his central motivation, was his list of names and the idea that he knew he had to die for everything.
Hmm.
Those two things. So the rumination, which is your default mode network, is just going, and the self thoughts and the inward thoughts and the inward thoughts. And so psychopaths have that problem. Everything's inward. We talked about it in our other episodes here recently. But also, hyper ultra depressives have the same thing. The ventral medial prefrontal cortex is kind of like the hub for empathy. That's reading other people's emotions and taking in the environment, but it's also your ability to have empathy for yourself and say,
Hmm.
"Wow, you're killing yourself inside, dude." And so we just basically had a switch where one got back to where it should be and the other turned back on.
We'll put a pin in that because that's actually one of the tangents I thought we might go down on chapter 15 about the nature of madness and the physical way that madness is portrayed
Oh
when
yeah, I got
Nynaeve
I got
heals
notes
it.
on that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So chapter 12, we're Min's point of view still, um, which I don't know that we've gotten a Rand point of view yet since we've had new Rand. I think it actually takes a while before we
No,
finally
the
get to
last
Rand's point of view.
actual point of view. No, did we
Was
not?
him on top of
We
of
got
Dragon
we
Mount.
Oh no, it was someone else's point of view when the apples were
The
growing.
apples, the apples were
Yeah.
the old farmer's point of view, and when he goes to the tower, it's Sawan's point of view, and then it switches to Egwene's point of view. Um, and now it's from Min's point of view, which I like.
Was
Um,
was Nyneave and the dust thing after Egwene stuff or before?
it was after.
Okay, because I wanted to
Yeah,
put a note on what it looked like when she was delving.
yeah. So, um, where is it? Uh, right, so the chapter 12 opens with Min not arguing with Nyneave, Nyneave arguing at Min,
Hmm.
which I like. It really shows um the the depth of character and why Min, as a minor, quote unquote, minor in the amount of screen time, but major in her importance, eh, that even someone with that little amount of time on the page goes through quite a character arc from where she started when we first meet her in Barrelon as this kind of snarky tomboy, and now she's gained a degree of wisdom that she is kind of teaching Nynaeve the wisdom, a lesson in patience. So she's not, Nynaeve is trying to argue with her because, dang it, you need to take me to him. We need to find him. He's in trouble. And Min is the one that she's not rising to the bait. From her past that she could trade barbs with anyone. That was one of the things they almost did right in the series, was putting Min and Matt together because of how well those two personalities play off each other. They did it terribly and they didn't go anywhere with it. But from the reading that Min could even trade, snark with Matt.
Well, bold prediction here, so we have it on tape to piss everybody in the audience off and you, and it's already pre-pissed me off. My bold prediction is they split up Rand's three girls to be Rand's girl, Perrin's girl, Matt's girl in
Yeah.
the show. So,
Yeah, I
uh,
think you said that in our when we were reviewing the second season, and that made me go that made me mad because it sounds so stupid that it's probably right.
I mean, it would be a consolidation of characters, which sometimes you have to do. Like you've pointed
Hmm.
out good ones in the
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings, but the that eliminates Tuan, which is a Shanshin connection to Matt, and it eliminates Fail, which is
Hmm.
basically the growth of Perrin.
Hmm. Yep. So I can totally see them doing it. Um,
Okay, so back to the story. No, one thing about Min here, and this is not on the storytelling, this is just on this is the theme of interpersonal relationships with these characters. She could have been a little more forthcoming on what she felt in the bond.
hmm.
Like, I'm not going to tell you where he is, but he was super, super angry and I was scared. And something happened. And I'm not going to tell you where he is, but he's not going to destroy a city because he's in a good place right now. Something changed.
Well, I think part of it is she hasn't quite figured out what it is, because I'm looking for a line here on
But
page
she could have said
188.
that much.
There it is. Okay.
She feels that much that something is
Yes.
different.
Yes. Uh, Down at the middle of 188, Rand had seemed more dangerous than he ever had before. Not even that night when he had knelt above her, strangling her with one hand, had he been as frightening. And then she smiled. And then had come the warmth. It radiated from the bond like the comfort of a winter hearth. Something wonderful was happening. Something she'd been awaiting without knowing it. And that is there's a lot of depth in that line. I really like that line. Something wonderful was happening, something she'd been awaiting without knowing it. Of um it it sounds trite, but it really is true of how do you know when you've found real love? You just know it. And it's hard to explain. It's why we so often use analogies and metaphors. Um, that she didn't know. She knew this Rand, what was happening to Rand, what he was becoming wasn't right and wasn't the real him. But she didn't know, she had faith that he was going to redeem himself somehow, but she didn't know how that would manifest. Is a lot of how I read that. And as usual, when it comes to deep philosophy, there's always a country song that represents it. And there's a couple of Travis Tritt songs uh, that I
It's a
thought of when
great
I read that line.
day to be alive.
Well, there's that one, but then also his song Love of a Woman, there's a line in there about how uh a woman knows her man even better than he knows himself. And that's something that a woman has over a man. Uh and I always like that line. And then there's another line in it is she stands behind him even when he's wrong. And it's not that you support him because he's doing wrong, but you're still there throughout all of this, throughout all the wrongness that Rand has been doing. Min has stayed there. She has stayed faithful. She has stayed true. She has stayed on his side. As we pointed out a couple of times, one of my favorite lines earlier, when the Aes Sedai are all arguing, when Nynaeve and Cadsuane are all arguing, and she says, hey, maybe the problem here is you're all trying to figure out how to control him, rather than figuring out how to help Rand the man, Rand the human
Hmm.
being. And
Which
and
will
so
lead to
she,
my comment, my first comment. Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
and so she's been there the whole time. The other thing that jumps off the page here to me is down at the bottom of 188, where um Nynaeve is trying to start an argument. Min took a deep breath. Nynaeve had been goading her into arguments lately. She certainly had good reason to be tense. Her husband was riding toward his death. The dragon reborn, a man she saw as her charge still, was wandering alone, and there was nothing Nynaeve could do. And if there was one thing Nynaeve hated, it was being powerless. It it perfectly fits Min's character that she nails that. She sees Nynaeve as clearly as we, the reader, does, who have insights that, the people in the world don't have. And yet Min is able to see that. And it's not an accident. I think it's all part of the construction of this character in Jordan's mind, that she sees these auras, she sees these parts of the pattern, even when she doesn't know what they mean. And sometimes she sees something and she just instinctively knows this means that, even if the iconography somehow seems odd. It's like, well, how does that symbol translate to they're going to get married? And she just knows.
Hmm.
And that's really all I have on chapter 12. So what did you have?
Well, in the second half of the chapter is Cadsuane,
Hmm.
and page 190. Okay, so she's talking about Alana,
Hmm.
and Nynaeve says she's only one person, and so far I understand. She was free to leave when she wished. And Cadsuane says, "Fa, the girl isn't only one person; she's a tool." That is exactly why Cadsuane couldn't be the one to help Rand, because she's the same.
Hmm.
Rand's big problem was he was trying to harden himself into a tool, but also harden himself so he could use people as tools.
Yes.
And as long as she was treating him as a tool, Alana as a tool, she had a blind spot to exactly what he needed.
Hmm. Which leads to, chapter 13, when he shows back up, and he basically tells her that when he apologizes to her is, yeah, I'll apologize to you because I was a jerk, but you kind of screwed up too, honey.
Yeah,
And you
and
need to recognize that.
yeah, and to add to it later in her own mind, the she says, and he's completely out of control. You can insert the just reading her tone in your head in completely out of my control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem here for Cadsuane.
Or as the weak point with all Aes Sedai, completely out of our control, completely out of the control of the people who know better for
Mm,
you.
yeah. Well, to her credit, though, in that same passage, backing up a bit on page 190, she uh she at least has enough wisdom to not go over the edge like Rand did when she's looking at Nyneave and thinking, "Are you telling me the truth here?" And she has this thought to herself, "Careful," she thought, "you'll end up as distrustful as the boy is." So it's okay to be skeptical, but not trusting anyone is just as bad as trusting everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so she understands that, at least to a degree, and the reason she's able to do better than most Aes Sedai is something that Rand says. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but in chapter 15, when Nynaeve is leaving to go to the tower, and he tells her, "Don't let them change you too much. The best Aes Sedai I've known are the ones other Aes Sedai say aren't very good Aes Sedai. That your passion is part of you. Yeah, you need to be able to control your emotions, but you don't need to that doesn't mean destroy your emotions. That doesn't mean suppress your emotions. There's a difference between controlling your emotions and suppressing your emotions, and he would know, because to your point, that's what he's been doing. And that's this realization he's come to, is I can mourn without wallowing in this despair.
Just wanted to bring this up before we go too far. We forgot comments. We got a lot of comments from the last time. Do we want to
Oh.
just save that for spoiler after we go through the main squeeze here?
Yeah, since we've already got going here, let's keep
Okay.
going and then we'll go to the
So we'll
comments.
address your comments right before any spoilers. And if there are comments that are spoilers, well, that'll be good timing then.
Um, I think one of the reasons uh New Rand works is because it's going to be a while before we're inside his head. So it allows, it's something of a writing trick to um make Rand sound deep, even if you, the writer, aren't as deep as what you're portraying. But you can make it seem like it, because there's a mystery there, because we're not inside his head. So for instance, uh right at the beginning of chapter 13 on page 193, uh we're back to Min's point of view. You bullheaded fool, 3 days. What have you been doing for 3 days? Existing, Min, he said, wrapping his arms around her. I wasn't aware that was such a difficult task. It has been for me at times. I mean, what an answer. What have you been doing? Existing. Well, that is difficult at times.
He basically went on a silent meditation retreat.
Yeah, didn't even need any ayahuasca.
Typically, the
uh
silent meditation retreats, you don't have that. It
yeah,
apparently
that's
drives
other
you crazy
stuff.
enough not talking for a week.
Um but then there are a number of little things throughout this chapter that demonstrate um Rand's change, and how uh so right at the beginning, Min's a little bit nervous, because who is this man who has come back? Is this still my Rand? And especially when she sees his eyes, because his eyes now, and I'm wondering if this was part of Jordan's notes and what he wanted to do, which is, I shared that one of those early interviews he did, where the interviewer asked him about his combat experience and how he thought that affected the way he writes combat and writes battles. And he said, well, it's not about the details per se, it's about the perspective of the veteran. And you get that from the very beginning with Tam in his fever dream. Rand knows that he went off and he fought in wars, but much like a lot of the people who do that, they don't talk about it with people who weren't there. And so Rand doesn't know any of these stories. Uh, and and one of the problems And I think one of the contributing factors to PTSD and to readjusting to society is that 1,000 yard stare. And normal people don't know what that is, why that is. You know, they can understand it intellectually, but there's no way you can feel it if you haven't experienced it. And so now there's this difficulty in relating. You know, like how do I relate to you? There's that uh I think we brought up Saving Private Ryan last time, and the Tom Hanks character as the
Yeah, because I
mentor
said that was
character.
a way of doing it right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the mentor character, when everything is falling apart there after they've assaulted that machine gun nest, and the medic has been killed, and everyone's, you know, literally pointing guns at each other, and everything's falling apart, and he just says, "Hey, what's the pool up to? I'm a teacher. I teach English. I've got a wife, I've got a couple of kids." And the really the money line there that brings everything down, brings everyone back together, is when he says, "I don't know how I'm going to go back to her, and how do I explain when she asks me what happened? How do I explain days like this? How am I going to talk to her about this?" And that I think is one of the reasons that movie was so impactful to veterans, is lines like that, because it opens with the visceral part of what they experienced. But then you have moments like that. And then, of course, the one that people really focus on was the very end of, as he's dying, he says, "Earn this." And the biggest problem mentally with combat veterans is survivor's guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to think that was a part of what Jordan was trying to do in setting up Rand, is this depth that he has, this knowledge that he has, this burden that he has, not just of what he's done in this life, but now he has the burden of what he did as Lews Therin, the good and the bad, of, I failed. Maybe it was the best I could do. Maybe it was what had to happen at the time, but look at what it did. Look at what it wrought. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to live with that. But then he smiles at her, and it's okay. These eyes have this 1,000 yard stare. He has wrinkles around his eyes now, and the guy's like 20 years old. So wait, were those wrinkles there before? Is this really Rand? And then he smiles, and it's okay. It's still him. He's different. He's changed, but it's still the guy I knew before he went off the war, and now he's
Mm-hmm.
come back.
There's a when it comes to Rand, period, there's a bit of acceptance, I think, is part of it, where on the mountain he accepted he is Rand and he is Lews Therin, where he was always trying to keep them as two separate things. And then you shift down later in the page, there's actually a mini trope here that is thrown in there when she said, well, she could be used against you to find where you are. And he smiled, but it felt good to see the expression on his face again. The shadow does not need her to find me, men, nor will it ever again. All his eyes are fixed directly upon me, and will be until I blind them. And that is a direct contrast to what we've had up until he had his epiphany moment of he was trying to hide.
Mm,
He was zooming around everywhere, trying to hide, trying to be unpredictable, trying to surprise people. But the trope I'm talking about here is the one of the things to not drive you into depression or anxiety or all these things is they tell you to be authentically you.
mm.
And what he is, he's accepted that I am Lews Therin. I am Randolph Thor.
I'm the dragon.
I am the dragon. Look at me. I'm no longer hiding myself from the world. And it's the old if you're gonna do any, if you're gonna be anything, be you, because nobody can be better you than you.
Hmm.
And he has to be the dragon. And I think he finally realized that.
He says that a couple of times through these chapters of something, along the lines of the time for subterfuge has passed. It's time for
Hmm.
battle now. You know, the draft was last night, and I wasn't even paying attention. The draft is fun because it's all speculative. It's all speculative. It's all hope.
Which
But
at least six teams have put their future in a
yeah,
new
yeah.
quarterback.
But then come the fall, you actually have to play the games. So the time for speculation, the time for subterfuge, the time for mind games is done, and you got to put it on the field and prove it.
Mhm.
Um, so page 197. I like this little moment here that goes along with what you were saying about the time for hiding is done, the time for subterfuge is done when he has all the high lords and ladies line up in front of him. And and besides just the coolness of now because he has fully embraced what he is, um it's almost like he wields the pattern itself because he can just look at you and know, oh, you're one of them. But that in and of itself is cool, but the part that really kind of jumps out to me in this read is uh is when he tells them to line up. And the high lords and ladies looked at him confused. A line, Rand said, voice loud and firm. Now.
Yeah, so
So
he's not just Confucius say. He is actually everything he needs to be.
loud and firm, not
Yeah.
angry, but loud and firm. You can still raise your voice. You can still make your point known and not be angry. Um, I went down a rabbit hole a little while ago when I discovered
Well, I'll
the
say
fat electrician.
there might be anger to it, but it's focused anger. It's not. It took control of me anger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a channel that I watch sometimes when I need a laugh, called Angry Cops, and he's not actually angry, although he is a little bit of that kind of the Sam Kinison kind of shouty, funny, but he's a former drill instructor. He's still in the reserves, and he's a police officer in Buffalo, and so he'll do videos on stupid crap that comes up, and that drives him crazy. But while he's having fun with the angry drill sergeant character, he's also making the point, I'm not actually angry. There's a reason I'm in your face shouting at you. There's a reason when you get off the bus, we swarm you, and they have a term for it. They call it the shark attack because they want to freak you out. They want to stress you out. It's not that they hate you. It's not that they're angry. It's that they need to break you down and build you back up. So it's not that it's an act, but it's also not real anger. There's a middle ground there somewhere of this is purposeful force, and that's what Rand is exhibiting here. Is I'm not playing around. I'm not going to, as you say, I'm not going to Confucius say you, but I'm also not going to fly off the handle like I've been doing in the past.
Hmm.
I'm, and he's very commanding.
Well, it's being what you need to be for the situation that's at hand.
Mm-hmm,
That's that being present,
mm-hmm,
existing. That's the
mm-hmm.
existing.
Speaking of existing, and then we get to one of the
That's why I
reasons.
put why Buddhism is true up because that is the whole premise of their not their religious philosophy, but their how you should live life philosophy.
Well, speaking of philosophies, is funny that you have that up because I'm about to get all Sunday school on you here.
Wait, where'd you go?
Page
What?
199, the end of the chapter.
Okay.
One of the reasons these are some of my favorite Sanderson chapters by far. That there's not a lot of nits I can pick here, and in part because, as you pointed out when we started, these are all short chapters, which he really could have benefited from in a lot of other areas, right? His interaction with Tam, when he sees Tam, and then when he goes up to him, and then he breaks down, and uh, and this is again from Min's point of view, and she's watching this happen, and where is it? Um, Rand, who had faced Forsaken without a tremor, was afraid of his father. And the fear there, though, isn't uh
A fear of a tyrant. It's a fear of acceptance.
I'm not angry. I'm not angry, son, but I'm disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
That is that is a real father figure. And that is I've heard a number of people say this, that postulate that one of the problems in accepting Christianity in today's modern world is the lack of good father figures, because so often throughout both the Old and the New Testament, the metaphor is God the Father, God as the father figure of everything. And if you don't know what that means because you haven't seen it, how do you relate to it? I mean, the whole point of using a metaphor is this is something that is difficult to understand. This is something that is difficult to grasp intellectually. So let me explain it in a way that you can relate to because you've seen it. Well, but what if you haven't seen it? And I have to think that both with Jordan and with Sanderson, I think there may have been a purposeful prodigal son motif going on here.
Yeah, but that's just your cis heteronormative patriarchal worldview. So,
Well, that's true.
yeah.
And
I
that's why we
made
all
it
need to be
through without
canceled.
stuttering. I was working on that in my head the whole time you were talking.
Have you ever had to use that? Have you used that line in class yet?
I have not ruffled any no, this is the great thing about okay, so slight sidebar, I'm going to spend like maybe 30 seconds. We were worried about what was going to be the thing here, and they'll make offhand comments while they're teaching, but for the most part, the class material is just the class material. Now, I haven't taken the specialty classes that are part of the track, like, you know, race and society and stupid
Ooh.
shit like that, which I actually don't have to do. So there's one, you have to take one of the social justice, I call them, so they don't call it that, but social justice related ones. And because of my thesis, anyways, I'm fucking taking aging. It is the least bad wrong of them all, and it actually fits my thesis of developmental psych and developmental
Mm-hmm.
physiology. So why would I take race and society and blah 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 or gender studies or whatever when I can just take the one that aligns and is the least bad wrong, because there is some ageist stuff that goes on, especially in the workforce now. Try getting a job as a 50-year-old engineer when you just lost yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, that leads us right back to this scene, because you need that wisdom. You
Mm.
know, it's it's just the start that Rand falls onto his father, hugging him, sobbing, saying, "I'm sorry, father. I'm so sorry." That's that that doesn't really, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but that's just the first step. The healing comes from, it's all right, son. It's all right. I've done so much that is terrible. Nobody walks a difficult path without stumbling now and again. It didn't break you when you fell. That's the important part. That's why people still remember the line from Batman Begins was,
I should have
"Why do
left
we
up
fall down?"
anti-fragile.
Yeah.
Not
Why do
only
we
did it
fall
not
down?
break you, it made you stronger, which he tells Cadsuane 2 pages before that.
Mm-hmm.
When she says you can't afford to fall, and he goes, "No, it's because of the pressure that I'm who I am."
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's what a crucible is.
I mean, it's no accident that those two things are back to back. Cadsuane immediately followed by Tam, the one
Hmm.
who tried to control him
Hmm.
and the one who tried to accept him and guide him.
Hmm.
Now, actually, the part that got me a little bit choked up last night wasn't the hug and the it's okay, son. It was when he turned into a little boy and he said, I want to introduce you to somebody. I'm really excited. I'm really excited. I want to introduce you to her. He's like,
He's laughed. I've been here for 3 days. I know her, but I didn't introduce you to her.
yeah. Yeah. And anybody who's over 18 years old knows that moment of, I've been dating this girl and I want to introduce her to mom and dad or whoever your parental figure is, right?
Yeah, and well, but also it's a good point because I didn't even think about the. I mean, again, he is only 20, 21 years old. He's got the 1,000 yard stare, but he's still 20, 21 years old.
Well, it
So
was no, it was 21 back in like when we asked the question.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so whatever that was, six or seven, book six or seven, or whatever. So I'd assume like 22, 23 now. I don't,
Well, I think things have been moving faster, so I don't think
and
he's
the
that much
seasons aren't
older.
exactly the seasons, so it's been
Yeah,
hard to
yeah. Um, where is it? Oh,
even still, he hasn't quite fully grown his prefrontal cortex. How about that?
yeah.
Yeah.
He waved to Min, and she raised an eyebrow, folding her arms. So he pulled up in the truck and whistled for her to come out, and she's just looking at him. I'm not coming when you wave at me. What are you doing? He looked at her pleadingly, so she sighed and climbed up the steps. I like your point about the he's still an excited teenage boy. There's still an element of puppy love there. And
Well, it's
I
not just the
think
puppy love, it's the accepting of I am a 20 something year old. I am this as well as this. That's the acceptance. I am going to fight the dark one, but I am also a young man. That's the acceptance. That's what he couldn't give up when he was really trying to be steel because the young man was weak. The young man can't fight the dark one, which is an important uh acceptance because what do we do for love when we're young? A lot of stupid shit, right? Like fight the dark one.
mm,
You need that fire to actually challenge the greater thing. That's why you go out and you get the job. That's why you go out and you take risks. That's why you protect your country. That's why you fight the person threatening your family. You need that youthful vigor. And he was pushing that aside to be what, steel? Something harder than steel, right? He was pushing the vigor aside. And that's where emotion is beneficial.
mhm.
The alpha 2 never becomes the alpha 1 without that emotion.
And you see that whole range here in this chapter because um he's genuine, he's apologetic, but he doesn't go too far with Catswin because he also acknowledges, hey, yes, I'm sorry. Honestly, I apologize, but you kind of screwed up too, honey. So, and then you see the firmness with the high lords and ladies. You see the command of, oh, you know what? We kind of glossed over, and we probably shouldn't, when the Aiel come out and he talks
Oh
to
yeah, yeah,
Rourke.
he has toe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and there's that element too of and there's Rourke as the wise, that we're told early on that even the clans and the septs that are at odds with him, even at war with him, they respect him. He is, the most respected of the clan chiefs.
Well, because the Wetlander version would be the great generals.
Hmm.
Pedronal, Gareth Bryan, Ideralda, all of what's the one in Valdara, the Shine Iron.
Oh yeah.
Starts
Crap.
with an A. Agomar.
Egomar, yeah.
Yeah. So all of these, they're the great generals, but they've been at war with each other. But they acknowledge each other as the
Hmm,
great
hmm.
generals. He's the Aiel version of that.
Well, and I think so it says something about both of these men when Rand says, I will meet my toe, and Rourke just looks at him and nods, is like, I believe you. I can see it in you now that
Do
you
do
will.
I do
You're
I
not
have
just
to
saying it.
do I have to say spoiler alert that this is one we actually never get resolution on because I don't think Sanderson knew how to write it.
Yeah,
He says
yeah,
I will meet my toe and we get a reconciliation there, but we never actually see it happen.
yeah, yeah. Well, so keep an eye on that as we go forward, especially if it's your first reading of, does this actually happen? And if so, what do
I
we
I
think about
mean,
it?
if
Because
facing Sightblinder one on one isn't meeting toe, I don't know what is, but he was going to do that anyways, so it's not like an extra special
exactly,
thing. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, any other thoughts before we move on to chapter 14?
No, no, no.
Um, so this is still about Rand, which again is why I like this.
Yeah, but I got a bitch on Egwene here as we go. My next note is 204, so if you got something before that.
Um, so right at the beginning, yeah, page 202. Um, I like this interaction with Egwene and Amos and Byre, and the demonstration. Again, one of the reasons I like Egwene is because she is fallible, but she does still have very strong character traits that make her stand out and make her worthy of the position that she has attained. And even these much older women, she is able to not only see something that they didn't because she's coming from a different perspective, but have the strength of will and character to actually point it out. To not only are these women way older than you, but they used to be your teachers. And so you're still able to say, please take care, Egwene said, summoning herself a cup of tea. I am not only one of those fools, my friend, but I am their leader, queen of the fools, you might say. Byre hesitated. I have toe. Not for speaking truth, Egwene reassured her. Many of them are fools, but are we not all fools at some point? And this is the line that really jumps out to me. You did not abandon me to my failures when you found me walking Teleron Rihad. In like manner, I cannot abandon those of the White Tower. You have Amos's eyes narrowed. You have grown much since we last met, Egwene Alver.
I think that's a false equivalence, though, because their problem is hubris. Egwene's problem was ignorance.
Mm.
It's two different things and two different ways of dealing with it. Uh, the language in this part was, I think, it made it hard to read. The conversational language because what it
Mm-hmm.
reminded me of was when you go to Renfest and everybody's talking like their old English. Come hither and have a
Ye
flagon
olde
of mead,
Englishy with
and
extra ease.
it's
Yeah.
so overdone, and that's what it felt like in this conversation to me. That was a little nitpick. Uh, so I'll go ahead and grant you that she shows some wisdom here because I think she completely throws it all out the window right after
Yeah,
that.
I'm interested what your note is because I've got a note on page 204. But before we get there, um, there's a little hint of what's coming with her inability to understand Rand still. Um, but I find it interesting, and I won't dwell on it too much because we've talked about this. The analogy I used before was how um, militaristic fascist imperial Japan of the late 1800s, early 1900s took the Bushido code, which samurai, interestingly, much like Aes Sedai, originally meant servant. You were not only a servant to the emperor, to the shogun, but to your people. Yes, you were the lord of your people, but You ruled them by serving them. And they warped that Bushido code and turned it into a death cult. And so it's interesting that the way Amos and Bayer answer Egwene when she talks about Rand is the Karakarn has embraced death, Amos said.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute, that sounds terrible. That sounds like what he was doing before. No, no, he was embracing death like the angsty teenager listening to death metal. He didn't truly understand. He has given up trying to be as strong as the stones and has instead achieved the strength of the wind. Or as maybe you should have had
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee up there, be water, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I love that quote is the whole thing. Go watch the whole thing of that interview. Is it's it sounds Confucius say be like water. Yeah, but what's the second part? Water can either flow
Flow or it can crash.
or it can crash.
Yep.
And that's why he uses that analogy, because sometimes you need a crash, but sometimes you need a flow.
Mm-hmm.
And the water can wear away the strongest stone, or as they, but it makes sense here that they wouldn't use that analogy because they live in the desert. So instead it's wind, which does the same thing in the desert of wearing away stone. um and to them, that is what they mean by embracing death, is the idea that uh oh, here's another great line, another way to illustrate the point is one of my favorite movies, The 13th Warrior.
That's a good one.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but kind of the main Viking who's the shorter guy with the blonde hair, who's kind of becomes pals with Eben, and he tells him, go and hide in a hole if you like. The skein of your life was written before your birth, so you'll not live one day longer. Because that their tradition, much like the Greek, comes from the idea that there are these gods, these fates that are weaving the tapestry of life. So your thread has already been woven in. Your thread has already been determined. So you can go hide in a hole if you want, but that's not going to let you live one day longer. So you might as well live life, is what he's saying. It's not, it's a paradox because you're embracing death, but it's not a fatalistic embrace of death. It's not a nihilistic embrace of death. It's an understanding that you can't live in fear of death because then you won't live.
Yeah, and then when you took the fate out of it, that's why Socrates had to be killed. Uh, but it goes back to Heraclides. He's the for those that aren't familiar, you never step in the same river twice. That's Heraclides. So it's the flux and flow. You are a part of the world, and what happens happens, and you do your thing. You know, and that's the he has embraced death. Whereas before, he knew he was going to die, but he stressed the shit out of it, which is the whole point of why zebras don't have ulcers, which is up there somewhere. Uh, Humans, we know we're going to die, and or say we're all the one of the biggest stressors in human life is we're all going to die, and we know it. And he knew he's going to die, and he knows it, but now here's what he's thinking. I think we get a little bit of this from his words is I am going to fight the dark one and I know it. That's the change.
It just dawned on me as you were talking, the depth of Jordan's creation here. This goes all the way back to the end of the first act of Eye of the World, because I would say the first third, the end of the first act, is when he finally makes it to Camelin and he meets Loyal. And what does Loyal tell him? And he's, oh no, I'm sorry, I think I accidentally offended you by reminding you of how short your life is. But he admires humans. Why? Because your lives are so short, you do things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he wanted to go out and see the human world, because you
And
do things.
and that's a trend in both Eastern and Western being Greek and Roman philosophy for a long time, is part of the reason that we accomplish things is the knowledge of death.
Mm-hmm. And so Jordan was setting this up way back at the beginning of Rand was given this kernel of knowledge, this kernel of wisdom, but he didn't understand it at the time because he had to go through, as he said, as he pointed out to Cadsuin, you had to go through this crucible to be forged. All right, let's pause there a second because my stupid allergies are making my throat hurt, and I need some more coffee before we go into where Egwene becomes bad Egwene.
Oh no, yeah, because we're gonna be on 204 here in a second. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then the wise ones leave, and Egwene goes back to being bad Egwene because this is a pretty big blind spot for her. With all of her wise beyond her years that she often demonstrates, but then we get to Nyneave was not there. Egwene drew her lips to a line. That woman. And and this is what jumped off the page at me is this line here. Egwene could bring the White Tower to its knees, turn a staunch member of the Red Hajah to her side, earn the respect of the toughest wise ones, but light help her if she needed the loyalty of her friends, Rand, Gawyn, Nyneave, all infuriating in their own ways.
Yeah, my same spot. So we had the same spot. Let's see if we have the same thoughts.
Well,
My notes were when friends don't bow to your narcissism. She confuses loyalty with obedience.
exactly. Exactly. There's also the other element that kind of jumped up at me was the what we snarkily say about Taylor Swift is uh what's the common denominator here, honey? At some point you got to realize, oh, I have all these bad breakups because I'm terrible at choosing men.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Maybe it's me.
Maybe
Maybe
it's
it's
me.
me.
Maybe I'm being overbearing. Maybe I'm being a queen bee to the people I least need to do that to. You needed to bring the tower to its knees. Do you really need to, or more importantly, want to bring your friends to their knees?
Well, not only that, the way she brought the tower to its knees, we appreciated because she did it in a
It's a good
way
point.
that was that was bringing the best out of people.
She showed she did not tell.
Mm-hmm. Where she could completely does a 180 here, and she is no better than Elida in these next several passages.
I think she does a creditable job of. Well, I'll disagree with that she's no better than Elida because she doesn't. I like the way she brings Nyneave around. I like the way she makes her point to
Oh, I
Nyneave.
hated that.
No, I
That's
loved
where we
that.
might differ. No, no.
Uh,
My note, page
Okay.
207, when she's doing this,
Yes.
bringing her around, was manipulative bitch, gaslighting at its best. And Sanderson wrote it so well, I wonder. That was my note.
Well, see, the reason I liked it, and this is where again the bad Egwene actually comes out in this what I thought was a good moment, is because she does to Nynaeve what she seems incapable of doing with Gawyn. She keeps trying to command Gawyn. She leads Nynaeve because, to Egwene's credit, this
Leads as in
is
being a good leader, or leads as in manipulating her?
well,
There's
but
two
some
different there's two different ways you can use that
hold,
word.
hold on, but sometimes you have to manipulate your friends if your friend is doing something wrong. You can't tell your friend you need to break up with this girl because she's toxic. You can't just tell that to your friend. And we've all had one of those friends. And if you haven't had one of those friends, it was probably you. But 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 you can't just say, hey, you need to break up with this person because they're toxic. You have to guide them to that realization themselves. You know, it's why I don't know that interventions actually work, because you're confronting rather than guiding. And she makes a good point. Nynaeve, why are you treating me the way you were treated?
Which, okay, so the same point could have been made in a less manipulative way. She put bait in a trap and let Nynaeve walk into the trap and then sprung it. Whereas it could have been when you were with the women's circle, you had these struggles, and wouldn't it have been great to have the people who were really there for you step up and help you with that process?
Mm-hmm.
And we could have had that. That would have been friends, because it's still the same conversation, but it's not done with a bait and switch. It's done with it's done the way it was done when she was talking to the sitters in the last book. Like, wouldn't it be better if this was the way, because these are the pitfalls to what you're talking about? Whereas she baited Nynaeve into springing a trap to get a gotcha. She Candace Owen this thing here. She got a gotcha. She let someone talk themselves into being an idiot to get her way.
I think the reason I like it is because it's in stark contrast with one of my least favorite moments of Egwene, which is when she berates Nynaeve in the world of dreams, to try and um, just queen bees it. I'm the boss bitch here.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when she like
Yeah, I
threatens to
remember
make her
what she.
drink
Yeah,
something? Now, that
yeah.
scene. I don't remember which book that was in, but that scene was infuriating for exactly why you're saying, because she just straight up, this is your friend who you're trying to remind, hey, we're friends and I need you, and instead you're cartmaning, respect my authority. She doesn't do that when Nynaeve goes, ah, crap, you're talking about me, aren't you? This isn't really about. She says, no, I, I am talking about you, but I do genuinely need your help. I need someone I can rely on totally.
It's still two ends of it's the horseshoe. It's two different ways of getting the totalitarian result, because especially since we have that in conjunction with her saying, but like, help her if I need her loyalty, if I need loyalty from my friends. We have it back to back. If it was, gosh, why won't my friends help me? I need this. I need this. I need this. It would have been different.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it was, dang it, they need to do this for me because it's what's right, and I need to. Yeah, it was. I yeah, I just think it was very well written
It,
Machiavellian manipulation, and that's why I don't like it.
where it falls short is that there is an element of an Elaine moment here, because she never has that realization of, oh, that's why I can't command the loyalty from my friends, because I'm trying to command them. There's no realization of me and Nynaeve just had a genuine moment woman to woman here, and that's what brought her around, because we had a genuine moment of connection here, of relating our feelings without, getting our backs up like two strange cats encountering each other, right? There was not that realization and moment of humility. That's why Elaine drives us crazy and the last half of the series, and we've talked about this, and she's here in a second, is she's never she never has that realization of humility, no matter how often she leads not just herself but others into terrible situations, literally getting people killed because of her bad decisions. And yes, it falls short. I like it, but I do agree it falls short, because there should have been a moment in Egwene's mind of, oh, hey, wait a minute, this is why it's been so hard for me to command the loyalty of my friends, because I've been trying to command the loyalty of friends instead of being a friend.
I'm just saying we have in Sanderson's writing, so we can't even say it's a Jordan versus Sanderson thing. Egwene logically discussing the counterpoints to the sitters
Mhm.
in a way that could have been used here,
Yeah.
where she used manipulation instead. And that was why I had a big problem with it. And I think the order here matters because there's no way she would have got away with that with Elaine.
Mhm.
Elaine probably would have outqueened her there.
Mm. Mhm.
And the thing that caught Elaine off guard was Nyneave being submissive. So there is a good bit of writing there where the order was important there because I don't think that moment would have worked with Elaine because
Mhm.
we would have been she would have been like, no, I've seen this in the court a million times. Come on, you're not gonna manipulate me like that.
Yeah, that is definitely a fair point. Um,
But I think this is the Scott and I. This might be the real big giant. There were a lot of little things along the way we bitched about, but this might be the big turning point for Egwene, because it's like from this point onward, she the space between her and Elida, you can slide a credit card through,
mm,
and both of them would take your money. So it's the whole point of Egwene taking over was that she should have been a contrast to Elida.
mhm.
But once she got the power, she wasn't. On her way to power, she was. But
That's true.
once she got the power, she wasn't. That and oh gosh, maybe we'll make this on our social episode, but the discussion Nynaeve is having about asserting yourself
Mhm.
as the young female or whatever.
Mhm.
Tulsi Gabbard just did a big kind of round table with Valuetainment, and she was asked about Kamala, and she said Kamala would be the worst thing for this country because she would do exactly what Nynaeve described here. She would
Really?
do something big to assert her authority and prove she's supposed to be there. Something like a war or something like a big, police state type action against the country. Something big to prove her authority. And problematic of Tulsi, she said this is a semi-female trait when they get into power. And it was interesting. And then I read this passage from Nynaeve right after listening to that, and I'm like, all right, well, we may have gotten that point before, but
It's a The problem is what Nynaeve is saying is a valid point, is a valid tactic to assert legitimate authority. But that's the key there is that Nynaeve was trying to assert legitimate authority and she needed to make her station clear.
the problem is there's a second option. Be competent and time will tell. That's a pretty good option.
Well, that's again back to that is exactly what Egwene did when she was a captive in the tower.
Mm-hmm.
She demonstrated a tremendous amount of competence, and that's what originally won over the novices, and then it won over the accepted, and then it won over the woman who was paddling her behind twice a day, and then it started to win over sitters and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, again, it's the change. That same mentality could have been how she went into her reign as a Mirlan seat. Take the licks early to prove your competence, and then rule.
Right before we move on to chapter 15 here, I want to point out something separate that happens right before all this happens. And I mostly just want to put a pin in it, um, because the importance of the world of dreams has been a major part of this reread, of seeing how important it is, how much more important it is than we kind of originally thought in our first read and even our first couple of reads, of Oh no, this is a much bigger deal than we thought. And that is bottom of page 204 onto the top of page 205 before Nynaeve shows up. She's in the hall. She
Hmm.
turned from the window, then froze. There, set into the glass below the flame of Tarvalon, was a large segment in the shape of the dragon's fang. That wasn't part of the original window. Egwene stepped forward, inspecting the glass. There is a third constant besides the creator and the Dark One, Varen's meticulous voice said, a memory from another time. There is a world that lies within each of these others, inside all of them at the same time, or perhaps surrounding them. Writers in the Age of Legends called it Teleron Riyadh. Did this window represent one of those, another world, where Dragon and Amarillion ruled Tarvalon side by side? I think that's important to keep in mind going forward for two reasons. One, reminding us of the importance of the world of dreams, both physically and metaphysically, in this creation that Jordan has made, but then also the importance of Egwene seeing that and having that thought of, and she doesn't know the terminology, but we the reader do, and Rand definitely does, of Amarillion Tamarillion.
Mm-hmm.
That was how it worked. And put a pin in that and keep that in mind going forward when with Egwene dead set on opposing Rand rather than there's a reason the flame of Tarvalon, the dragon's fang, the yin yang symbol. There's a reason those are supposed to be combined. That is the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai, because there is a push and pull.
Mm-hmm.
It's not opposing, but it might sometimes require challenging, and there's a difference. And I think we see that in the very next chapter with Nynaeve talking to Rand. So we'll get into the madness in a second, but in chapter 15, um, the uh, the bit where Nynaeve is when Rand shows back up and she says, I need to leave, I need to go because Egwene needs me. And he explains to her, and Nynaeve just says, she thinks you're wrong. She thinks this is a crazy idea. And he explains, no, I need to break the seals, and here is why. And Nynaeve goes, I think I understand, and I think you may be right. Because there is a better relationship there because Nynaeve actually understands Rand more than Egwene does.
Mm-hmm. So in that chapter, we'll just blow past the bubble of evil because that's kind of self-explanatory. Sad story, but nonetheless, everything became ash and blew away. But then we get to her delving
Mm-hmm.
knife,
Yeah,
knife.
whatever.
Uh, so I did make a snarky comment with that. In informed consent seems to be lacking in Aes Sedai and the prospective Aes Sedai here because they do tend to do these kind of things. And she's making comments in her head about how she can just completely destroy his brain the whole time. And he never said, cool, go ahead. Even though that it came out in a good result.
Mm-hmm.
This is okay. So there are times when my son does something that is completely not smart and dumb, but it ends up working out in the end because my initial thing was I'm going to let him do the dumb thing so he'll learn his lesson. But it didn't turn out too bad because of luck. And so I'm like, okay, now I've got to come in and tell you that that was stupid and you got lucky because otherwise you would actually be emboldened to do it again
Mm-hmm.
because you got through it the first time. It's the putting a blindfold on and walking across the street. You're not necessarily going to get hit by a car.
And I see, I think Nynaeve, I think there's a bit of a recognition of that when she tries to do it on Rand. Because
But the only thing that
Naive's,
stopped her was the white light.
no, I don't think it was just that. I think it was how complicated, how deep the darkness was in Rand's mind. that relatively speaking, Nafe's madness was relatively benign. Now, it wasn't to him. That's one of the reasons I like the scene, is because
Oh, yeah,
she's
he
looking
was a
at it.
paranoid schizophrenic. That's what he
Yeah,
was.
she's looking at it thinking, this is kind of like compulsion. I think I can fix this. And it doesn't seem all that complicated to her. There is danger, and she recognizes that, and that's a bit of a failing on her part. Is that, hey, Nyneave, perhaps you should have told the patient what you were about to do before you did it. But
Well, yeah,
I
I
do,
can suture a cut, but I'm still going to ask you if it's yeah.
yeah. So I did like how, to her, she's thinking that, I mean, I could just leave this because it's not that big of a deal. His, relative to others, his madness is relatively benign. It wasn't to him. I mean, he literally gets down on his knees and thanks her
Hmm.
because of
Which
expressing
is
what he's had to live through.
problematic because we have positive reinforcement for a negative action. So,
But I do think she understands how careful she needs to be when she delves Rand. And I don't think it's just the light, which I do want to talk about, but the how many of these black thorns are dug into his mind. And she sees, holy crap, I could not do this. And if I tried, I would destroy his mind. Good thing I don't have to.
hmm.
Um, I was curious what you thought about the kind of physical manifestation, the physical description of madness here, the way it's portrayed with both Nafe and Rand.
Yeah, it's tough because it is metaphysical in nature. Like you wouldn't have the actual thorns of taint in your head.
But just this Wednesday, we were talking about brain scans and
Yeah, yeah,
psychopathy.
and so yeah, what we would be talking about there is synaptic connections, but also lesions. Lesions in the brain are a big thing when it comes to that kind of thing, like psychopathy, where there was lesions in the brain that would actually manifest in the ability to read empathy from other people. So other people's feelings matter less, not because you're an asshole, it manifests as you being an asshole, but not because you're an asshole. It's because you don't even register it.
Mm.
Their screams of pain are like, oh, well, this person's making a lot of noise, instead of, oh my gosh, they must hurt. That's two different things, but it's actually registering in a different way. So to have this kind of metaphysical, it's actually really cool that the way they did it, that it may be blocking these parts of the brain versus an actual like lesion, a cut, an actual piece missing of the brain, or bad synaptic connection. So that to me leads more to my first analogy of addiction. It's the physical effects you feel from something like alcohol or heroin or something like that aren't the problem. It's the way it long term affects your brain in a secondary way. It's usually a secondary chemical in those things that comes in and creates a difference. And it would be like little thorn pricks in different areas because the different areas would be whatever neurotransmitter that drug disrupted.
And I'm wondering if, again, if this was one of those things that RJ knew, had researched, or if he intuited it,
It
because,
would have been around by the time Sanderson wrote this, but that kind of stuff wouldn't have been around by the eye of the world,
but
or even up to
yeah,
like the 90s books. Yeah.
but I think that something this important had to be a major part of the notes that Sanderson was working off of. And your point about addiction is the other thing that jumped out at me is when Nynaeve is looking at it and thinking, this is a lot like compulsion, and has the thought of, is that what the madness is? The dark one is putting a kind of compulsion on your mind to compel you to see these things, to feel this way, to act a certain way. And so, in that way, this, to your point that you
With
made a while
with
ago, is the
with
madness is a lot like addiction.
yeah, but with Nafe it wouldn't be compulsion. With Nafe, he has a perceptual issue, right? So it's disrupting the the translation of reality to what happens in his brain. So, if he's seeing things, there's something happening as that signal goes through his hypothalamus and then to his visual cortex, and then the visual cortex branches out to the other parts of the brain. Something is disrupted in that, which would have nothing to do with motivation. Whereas if we're looking at a compulsion, I would think it would affect the dopaminergic section. So the singular nucleus and all of those, the substantia nigra. That's what I was thinking. But that where the dopamine would flow out and motivate you. So compulsion to me is affecting your motivational centers,
Hmm.
whereas this is an outward to inward kind of disruption. So to think of it as a compulsion, I don't know, but to think of it as a disruption, that could go either way because you could disrupt the motivational system. And
Well, that's why I liked the and found interesting her thinking that it's like compulsion. And then initially, she tries to heal it in the same way that she did heal compulsion previously. And that doesn't work. And she says, okay, it's like compulsion, but it's not compulsion. So I need to do something different.
well, so let's go with that because what she described as her healing of compulsion was actually kind of an inside out approach. She
Hmm.
put the weave over the top for the brain to push it out. Whereas what she's doing with Nafe is an outside in. This thing is disrupting the perception. It's coming in from the outside. She pulled it away. She pulled the thorns away from him and then healed the spot, pulled it away, healed the spot, pulled it away,
Hmm.
healed the spot. So it's more of a perceptual thing. Now that could change how you act because if say he was to see these things, the madness progressed, and he was to see these things coming at him when a normal person was walking at him,
Hmm.
he might have reacted to that in a way that was insane and damaging, right? So that might have been the progression to it. So perception is huge. So yeah, he's more of a schizophrenic, which is not a motivational thing. But it does affect the way you do react to things. Uh, where Rand is, I think realistically, I think Jordan played the more schizo route with all of these because it was always a questioning of reality with Rand. Is this
Mm.
voice real? Are these thoughts real? Are these memories real? Is this a part of me or is this something separate than me?
All right. Well,
With a metaphysical bend because it technically was both.
that's all I really wanted to talk about with chapter 15. The second half of the chapter with Egwene and trying to hunt down Masana.
I did
Eh,
have a thought about Masana.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because okay, so this is funny because it goes with our social episodes. Masana, the way that Siren, one of the S's,
Oh yeah,
described
yeah,
her,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
she said,
Yes.
okay, let me find the passage. Page 228. Uh, where's the exact passage? Okay, so Egwene nodded slowly. It's halfway down the page. She's an organizer, she thought, an administrator who hates being relegated to that position.
Yes.
Welcome to modern admin, by the way. Your medical administration are people who didn't have the chops to be nurses and doctors and PAs. And now they're in medical administration and they hate their lives and their jobs. This is actually a contagion in society right now. It is one of the biggest causes of our healthcare issues, our administration issues in colleges and universities, all of these things. These are bitter people that didn't have the chops to be the thing they wanted to be. So they did that version of administration. And now they sit in a cubicle all day posting memes about how they hate their job. But they also end up in charge of everything because They're in charge of hiring and firing and, all the things that would be a threat to someone who's actually trying to do their job.
Yeah, I forgot that part did jump out at me, and it made me want to go dig around in those uh that interview section on the wiki and see what Jordan said his influence, who some of his influences were, who he read when he was younger. Because we talked about Philip K. Dick and his influences on The Man in the High Castle and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and reading SS Gestapo diaries, right? And so one, that was something that jumped out at me because it is darkly hilarious to look at who was the hierarchy of the regime that purported to be the Ubermenches. We are the superior race, and look at Goebbels, look at Himmler. I mean, even Hitler himself. The only one of them in that hierarchy that really looked the part was Goering, because he actually was one of them. He was the only one that had actually demonstrated. The rest of them were wannabes. Goering was a legitimate big athletic guy who was a World War I ace, a legitimate war hero. All the rest of them were pathetic wannabes who once they got into power went way overboard because of what you're saying. And
Yep.
the other thing that it reminded me of is I heard a clip of an interview with Frank Herbert when we were talking about Dune, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole on Herbert, and he had a a much greater disdain for to him. um like I can't ever remember who said the banality of evil, but that's what Herbert worried about. And in this clip of a panel he did, I think at some university, and he was making the point of, when was the last time you had a good experience with a bureaucrat? Why? Because you didn't hire them and you can't fire them. And so, to
That's
your point,
amazing. I have to remember that.
these are people who are in this position because they couldn't do what they wanted to. Most of the time, there are going to be exceptions. And so they're already bitter and they have no accountability.
Yeah, so go just a little bit further up in the page. It was a curious reference from the Blue Scholar Lanus, who indicated that Masana was second only to Demandred in sheer anger.
Yes.
And that was there's kind of like male female equivalents across these things, right? With the Forsaken. I think with Moghedian is probably Asmodean. It was that person that just kind of did it because they were too crooked to be anything
Mm-hmm.
else,
Mm-hmm.
and Demandred and Masana being Demandred was always the wannabe. He wanted to be
He was always the runner-up.
he was always the runner up. And Masana was always the one that was not given the good stuff because she was a midwit,
Those,
realistically.
those who can't do, teach.
Mm-hmm. And she was the planner. She was the hyper organized, the person who rearranges your office every 2 weeks, and you walk in and you're like, what? Where did everything go? That kind of person. Uh, what are the other Grendel and Samael were kind of the same. They both had that kind of underlying passion but control at the top. So that's why they were
Mm.
good partners, right? The only one that doesn't have an equivalent is Ishi/Moradin. That's why there's 13. There's not 12, right? There's no equivalence there to Ishi. So
Mm.
it's well, who would be Simerage's?
Well, Simmerhaj was pure sadism.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think.
That
Who would be the male of that? What would probably be Ravine, because he was pure uh it wasn't sadism, but it is pure control of the what would you call that? Because a lot of people would say Ravin and Grendel, but
to
Grendel
me,
Grendel in her own head talks about how a lot of that is a front.
exactly. And
Yeah.
Ravine, one of the few bits you get is he loved playing his lovers, but they weren't really lovers because they were compelled. So he's a serial rapist, and he loved pitting them against each
So
other.
he was sadist.
Hmm.
He just did it a little bit differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's equivalence across the board on all the Forsaken except Ishi, which is again you got an odd number. So it's no surprise that Masana is the way she is. But yeah, it just really made me think of bureaucrats and admin the way they're because they all hate their job. Look at them. Walk into a college advising office and get a smile. It doesn't happen.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all we got for that then. So let's get into the comments. And I don't know that we have any.
Sorry for the hiccup there. We are going to comments. We might do a little spoiler, though we don't have a whole lot of time because we did gloss over some new viewings, and sometimes we go over those in spoilers. But comments, episode 256. So ideals are isomorphic is listening again and is making their way back up. The latter here. Every character except maybe Rand feels more shallow in Sanderson's hands, but Matt was a straight atrocity. Yes, yes, yes. Didn't he read The Knife of Dreams before writing this? Matt is written as Tuon thought of him before the climax reveal of The Knife of Dreams.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
I've never thought of that, but that is
Well,
a
I said
great.
Matt is written as Nyneave thought of him. He said Tuon thought of him, but it's actually the same, right?
Yeah,
So wait till
yeah.
he gets to the episode where I make that comment. That is that he is a fucking buffoon who stumbles into right answers. It is as if Sanderson is a fucking nerd who doesn't under oh, this is a long comment, who doesn't understand respect between men. He doesn't understand what makes someone become one in charge, and he thinks
Mm,
it's all make believe by adults. Matt's men worship him because he is competent. Ah, theme for today. Our whole emotional climax of previous books for others, Nynaeve, Tuan, to see him as a competent dude. Yes, yes. Matt takes himself seriously. He takes his responsibilities seriously. Bro, at one point, Talmanes calls Matt an idiot in the new books. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I had to put down the book for a couple of days after that. It made me so effing angry. When men respect an authority figure, that person becomes sacred in a way. Certain conduct is never acceptable. Robert Jordan understands that because he served in Vietnam, had to put his life in other men's hands. Brandon Sanderson grew up in a library and was always jealous of a Chad who didn't spend his time reading and still somehow got the girls and respect. Embarrassing. Which
That
was
is,
kind of my initial opinion of
yeah.
Sanderson, wasn't it?
That this is something Critical Drinker has been harping on for a while of one of the reasons modern movies and games and other things suck and aren't as good is because back in the day, those people lived lives. And then I think I've used this analogy before, but Undertaker, once he finally retired, because he was one of those old school guys that would not break character. So he would not do interviews. And now that he's retired, he does. And one of the ones that jumped out at me, and I don't know if I've said this before, is when he was working up through the regional stuff, through the minor leagues, he had to do a lot of odd jobs to try and make ends meet, scrape enough money together to keep going. And he said this so nonchalantly, I almost spit my drink out, is that, so I forget what they call it when they cut themselves. I know that they call blood color when you want to get
Mm-hmm.
colored. They have a term for it in wrestling when you cut yourself. And he says, so, because he was making the same point of on the one hand, it's good that the WWE now basically has these camps where they will train you to become a wrestler. And so on one hand, that's good because you get a lot more technical skill because of all this training. The problem is you don't know how to sell a story in the ring. As he said, so if I'm going to get color, I know how to react because I know what it's like to be stabbed. Wait, what? Because one of the things he had to do is he's a huge guy. So one of his odd jobs was he worked at a bouncer as a bouncer. And so he'd actually been stabbed before. So he knew how to sell it. He knew how to react if he got cut or if he got hit in a certain way. You know, there's still some contact, there's still going to be some pain, but you got to sell it like you really got nailed. And he knew how to do it because he'd been sucker punched before, because he'd been stabbed, because he'd lived a life.
Yeah, I think that's good enough. Yeah, a good long comment there. I'll have to look ahead of time to know how long it is before I commit to reading it all from base. Next time I'll just take notes and we'll do it like we do the books and just. But on to the what is the current episode or the last episode? Oh, we what were we talking about? About the cough, sneeze.
Oh, you almost made me
Oh yeah,
put
yeah.
hot coffee out my nose because you said something. I don't even remember what it was, but
Yeah, I rewatched that
um
episode too, and I remember that. And while I was listening to it, I wasn't watching it, and all of a sudden it gets quiet, and for about 10 seconds, and I'm like, did I almost make you spit up your? Yeah. Okay,
well,
so
hey,
they got to have the martini story.
yeah, I was about to say, Scott, it could be worse. Sam,
Yeah.
tell him
Okay.
how.
So no, you tell it how, because you were the one watching. I'm biased because I was the one in pain.
I don't even remember the context. It was so long ago,
We were doing
but
online Dungeons and Dragons,
we were
Pathfinder.
gaming,
Yeah.
and somebody said something that
Stal. Stal said something.
caught Sam so by surprise as he was taking a drink of a, wasn't it a jalapeno martini?
Jalapeno martini. Yes.
And you were trying to hold it in so hard that it didn't come out your nose, it came out your tear ducts,
Yes. So
which I didn't even know could happen.
some people have really bad sinus infections and sinuses. I actually have very open sinuses. And well, yes, your tear ducts actually, the purpose of your tear duct is to drain liquid into your sinuses. All the liquid that goes through your eyes goes into your tear ducts. That's why your nose gets runny when you cry. Well, anything that flows one way can flow the other. And just with enough pressure, with enough pressure. But I was trying not to snarf, and jalapeno martini came out my eyes, and that was quite a painful experience. But I was crying and laughing so hard at the same time because of the situation that it was so hilarious that I'm surprised nobody else snarfed anything while we were laughing at my own
We
pain.
the game got derailed for quite a while we all laughed at you and your excruciating pain because that's what guys do.
Yeah. But
Spe-
also, as guys do, you can look back at it and laugh about it instead of being like, "Don't tell that story."
yeah. Speaking of guys, I don't think Sanderson actually understood Borderlanders.
Yeah,
I that's
review previous comment we just read, the long one. Yeah, he doesn't
exactly.
understand men
It's
in general. Yeah.
he understands it superficially. He understands the influences that the Borderlanders came from, but he doesn't feel it as intuitively as Jordan did because again, Jordan lived a life. I don't even remember where the SNL comment came from. I remember it came up somehow. You were talking about improv
Improv
versus
versus
stand up.
stand up. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know Second City. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Um, that is actually where a lot of the best SNL people came from. It's a Chicago-based improv group, and so Farley came out of there. Um,
So
uh,
basically, it's the farm ground before corporations said you can't
mhm,
say this, is
mhm.
what it is.
So I know Farley came out of there. A lot of the Chicago area comics. Gary Sinise actually came out of Second City. So that's where he got his start, and then he went into stage and then on to more serious, dramatic movie work. But he came out of there. A lot of your well-known 80s and 90s SNL guys, they actually got their start in Chicago in Second City.
Okay, so the comment on the breakfast. Okay, so this is something as a health professional who works in fitness and nutrition, primarily. This is actually one of the mind fucks with looking at evolutionary biology and how things are done and how preferences are, because this is one of the things that is, yes, evolutionary, but counter to survival. Women do not like high protein breakfasts. They do not like high protein diets, period. They do not eat as much meat as men. They do not eat all of these things. And you look back evolutionarily, that makes sense because they were left to gather while the men went out to hunt. And by the time the meat all came back, it was being portioned out. Whereas they could snack as they go
Mm,
while they're gathering, right? So this is one of those things that kind of makes sense from an adaptive sense, except the body didn't adapt. Women actually benefit from high protein diets more than men,
hmm
and it keeps them younger, longer, which is what women obsess over. But
hmm
yet they refuse to do the high protein diet because I don't like it. So this is one of those areas, and I'm trying to square this circle in a lot of ways, and I'm looking a lot of my spending a lot of time my time trying to find people who have put these things together. But women desire a certain thing, but they do everything in their lives to make it harder to have that.
hmm
And one of the biggest motivating factors for women is to stay younger longer.
I don't have it on my phone anymore because that phone is on the at the bottom of Galveston
You know
Bay.
what? When the
But
tide was down, we should have looked for it.
we should have. Bet we could have found it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one of the pictures I used to have on my phone when I was training, and this was for girls and women, was there are a number of memes out there, but here's a block of fat, like actual fat. Here's a 20-pound block of fat. Here's a 20-pound piece of lean meat. Which one's bigger? Right? Because you have to convince them that yeah, you're probably going to gain weight because you're doing I'm having you lift weights. But this is why. Because
Yeah, weight versus size. Yeah.
here's what lean muscle looks like, here's what fat looks like.
But one of the two biggest things in visual age with men and women, this is universal, this is humans, is lack of muscle mass and elasticity of your skin. Guess what eating animal proteins does? Helps you with muscle mass and collagen and healthy fats for your skin. You don't get the fat that makes your skin look youthful from polyunsaturated fats and vegetable oils. Yeah.
So yeah, so you could spend hundreds of dollars on creams that have collagen in them, or you could just eat a steak.
Yeah, or just a little bit more than you would before.
Mhm. All right, what's next? Um,
I really wish that Harriet or Maria would get Jordan's notes
mhm,
published so we can see what he wrote versus a hot mess Sanderson created. Perhaps that's why they haven't. And I would say that perhaps needs to have exclamations on it because that
mhm.
the Vegas odds would be that's why they haven't. But there are places where I think RJ wrote sentences or even paragraphs that are included in the final three books. No, that is definitely because
Mhm.
there are whole sections of a chapter that seem out of place with Sanderson's writing.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So, the first time you read through, where you're just reading through for the plot, the second time I read the Sanderson books is where I really started to point out, I think that section or even that whole chapter was was partially written by Jordan and just touched up by
Hmm.
Sanderson. Yeah. What the heck were we talking about that brought up this comment about Corvettes? I don't.
Uh, we said something about midlife crisis, I think.
Uh, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned that I still drive a minivan because it's just
Yes, yeah, you did
practical,
said that, yeah.
and I would really
Now,
like to have a truck,
as far
but
as the pickup truck, I do have one, and my nuts do not reflect how jacked up the pickup truck is. I would like the public to know. But no, I'm a hero. I was the hero during Harvey, right?
uh-huh.
Because I could drive through very high water and I could off-road. Uh,
Mhm.
But when it comes to driving to school twice a week, I'm like, I'm glad classes are only twice a week because I can hear the gas sucking through the thing. So pickup trucks are useful. Uh, and I would not give mine up for the world, but there are times and places. But at the same time, the Corvette would suck the gas the same way. It's a
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
performance vehicle. It's not made for fuel efficiency. Sometimes I wish I had the disposable income and driveway space to have a drive around car and when I need it truck.
Hmm.
That would probably be the most efficient way to go. Have a little freaking, I don't, would this Toyota make the Matrix anymore? No, the
I
Prius,
don't know.
right? Whatever. A hybrid car or something to drive around when I just need to run to the store or something. Because I can hear when I turn the truck on, it like makes a bubbling sound because of all the gas that's going through it. Yeah.
Well, that's why you have so much torque and you can haul stuff. But there's a trade. There are
Well,
no
and
solutions, only trade-off. We
and when
haven't
I'm
said it
working
in a
on,
while, but
my mom's property and stuff, it's
yeah.
all sand out there.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've taken that thing all the way to the back through the woods, up and over the hills and everything. So it off-roads really well. So
Mhm.
that's exactly why I got that truck. And again, in the high water situations, people love me. But then they say, "Oh, you're killing the climate," when, everything's normal.
Mhm. All right. Last comment, a little more bitching about Matt and Sanderson. That yeah, I think this is where we were really focusing on trying to be funny rather than actually being funny.
Hmm.
Because yeah, that letter seemed so forced. It was, it's what modern MCU has become by trying to replicate Joss Whedon's humor. And I think I may have even said this last time
Yeah,
as
you
an
said it last
example.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, but he knows how to do it right. He knows when to do it, more importantly. Another example would be episode 4, 5, and 6, which had comic relief in it, and then the prequels where Lucas kind of forgot all of that because he was trying to make a kids movie for his kids,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
and,
yeah. It's
and
the
it
difference
was
between
way
Han Solo
overdone.
calling the princess in a snarky way
Hmm.
versus going on a monologue about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that if you had to pick, there are so many to uh our new homeboy, um who's the other guy who's commenting? Brain fart again.
Isomorphic. Yeah.
Isomorphic. Yet to his point, where you had to put the book down, there are so many points, especially in Gathering Storm, where it's like, who is this? Who even is this character? But if you had to pick just one small sample, I would say the letter illustrates how much Sanderson doesn't get Matt as just a small snippet of, rather than a whole chapter. Here, just look at this. He doesn't get him. All right. So any closing thoughts here while we finish, put a period on this episode.
Yeah, because we get to Perrin and Matt again.
Uh,
Oh, as far as spoilers, did you want to quickly look at Min's viewings?
no, I think we could save those for later, and because I think they're going to kind of come up pretty quick here.
Okay, cool.
And the more interesting ones are going to be at the very end, where I kind of think we may end up doing an epilogue episode just of all spoiler speculation, what we think about this and that, and how things ended up. Because I think we could have quite a bit of time after that final chapter of, so what happened with this and that, and how did this and that happen?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think a meta theme from these last few chapters, and it seems to be since Sanderson took over, is there's a lot of, and I brought this up in kind of a snarky way with the informed consent.
mm,
But there's a lot, and it seems to be this is where Sanderson's strength is in writing, which makes me worry about what he thinks, period, is I know what's good for you, so this
mm,
is the way it needs
mhm,
to be.
mhm, mhm.
And that seemed to shift a lot in these last few books, where there
Something
was
to keep an eye on in the next couple of chapters for sure, with because we're back to Perrin and Matt. So
Yeah, and I think the thing to keep an eye on is he doing that on purpose to have the contrast at the end, which I don't see that happening because Rand takes over another body at the end. But it's yeah, I just feel that shift. And that was a big example because I'm like, she just did a major medical procedure on a dude without telling him what was happening.
yeah, that straight up could have lobotomized you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there will be some interesting thoughts there, but next time there will be some who knows kind of thoughts. We had a nice break here. I thought these were four pretty darn good chapters, all things considered. Next week's might be a little rough.
Well, like I said about well, I said it depends on if Jordan wanted these characters to be that way.
Yeah.
They're good chapters in the direction the book is taking,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know what direction that was supposed to be.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, we will see y'all. Are we doing a Wednesday episode or are you getting your butt
No, I'll
fixed?
be able to. What is next Wednesday? No,
Uh-huh.
that's the next week after that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll be good this next Wednesday.
All right. We might have to talk politics because we haven't done that in a while, and I have thoughts, even though I hate it.
Any
But
specifics so I can get prepared?
did RFK irrevocably damage himself with his pick of vice president?
Initially, yes, but this is actually one where just the tease. I think the whether he takes more votes from Biden or Trump actually depends more on Trump's VP pick than
Mm-hmm.
on his own.
Mm,
So
point.
what I'll need to do before that is I've been meaning to do this anyways because I had a knee-jerk reaction to her, but I need to actually listen to her speak and take away that knee-jerk reaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean it's going to end up positive. It's just not a knee-jerk negative reaction. It is an actually informed negative reaction.
Yeah, and I've got a video, a more recent video of him that I've been meaning to get to, and I'm working my way through my YouTube channels that I haven't been paying attention to lately because I've just been checked out for like the past 2 weeks on
Well,
anything
the problem is
news and
nothing's
related.
going to really materialize till
Yes,
August.
yeah, that is
August
also true.
answers a lot of questions because I hate that they make us wait that long for the VP picks.
I don't think they will. I think Trump's going to pick before the convention, well before
Well,
the convention.
Vegas odds right now have Tim Scott number one, Tulsi Gabbard number two, Christy Nome number three, and I can't remember the order after that.
Mm,
But so speculating out loud, Tim Scott I mean, it would be obvious trying to pick a black vote. And Tulsi Gabbard, to me, actually is a more well-rounded pickup because not only is it the female comfort zone that could come out of that, but also independence in general.
mm,
The 43% of the voting base that is independent love Tulsi Gabbard.
mm-hmm,
So to me, if you're making a calculation, even if you do the Tim Scott route, how much of the black vote are you going to get? Another 5%? A 5% of 14% of the population? Or if you pick up Tulsi Gabbard and you get 5% more women, 5% of 50% of the population is the better gamble. Now,
mm-hmm,
yeah, as far as who can do the job, they probably both could.
mm-hmm.
But I hope Tim Scott's ready if he's picked because he's going to get the House
Oh yeah,
other word, yeah, comparison. If
Society
he
of Magical. Oh, wait, we can't say that word.
Yeah, and so if he's not ready for that, he is going to be put in a bad place. I think
Mhm.
Tulsi's ready for the traitor thing. I
I
think
think she's a fighter anyway. I think she likes the fight.
that and to see to see her and Kamala on the same stage after she
That would
ripped
be
her
glorious.
that is something if for no other reason I will hope she's the pick just to watch that debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll ramble about that Wednesday, and then we'll have, I don't know which will be less fun, talking politics Wednesday or talking Perrin and Matt on Friday, but we'll try and make it fun.
All right,
Maybe
see you
maybe
guys.
there will be a lot of alcohol involved.
See you guys later.